are there ties when it comes to not just music, but also wrestling when you're playing tonight and you're looking at that ceiling of Madison Square Garden, you think about all the great moments that happened in that arena?
Yeah, the first time we played Madison Square Garden, I think it was about 96. I remember standing in one spot in the arena, and it's like there's that tunnel that the Sheik and Hulk used to walk out of. When you watch the old WWF stuff.
Yep.
And they would come towards hard camera, like whatever that tunnel is, they come.
Yeah, with the exit sign.
And then I'm walking through that tunnel. I mean, come on.
It's crazy.
If you're a fan, I mean, to your bones a fan, you can't help but get goosebumps when you think of the people that walk through that. I mean, Buddy Rogers. I mean, whoever.
Bruno, Bob Backlund, Hogan.
I mean,
it's amazing.
Billy, did you ever go to matches at the Garden?
No, it was weird because my family was relatively poor, so I never got to see live event wrestling. In fact, I think the first time I ever went to a wrestling show was a WWE house show, and I think the second event I ever went to was ECW at the Odeon in I think it was '99
in Chicago.
Yeah, those are the first two professional wrestling events I ever went to in my life.
Gotcha.
And I mentioned before you came on that Busted Open did the show with Chris Jericho on Talk Is Jericho about the Garden. And there's very few venues that you walk into and you just feel the history of that building. And I remember going the first time my dad took me there, just saying, oh my gosh, just looking around and saying, do you feel now with all these new arenas and these updated arenas that there's very few venues now while you're doing this tour that have that same feeling like Madison Square Garden does?
Yeah, there seems to be less of those now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that is. Maybe those buildings don't tend to last unless they're truly historic venues. But trust me, you play the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville, which I have a few times, and you think about all the great country stars that stood in the exact same spot you're standing. I mean, you can't help but be humbled by the thing.
Billy, I have a friend who's a Pumpkins fan. And he was telling me about the show maybe 2 or 3 nights ago, and he said he had seen you a bunch of times. He said, this is by far the best I've ever heard them sound. They're so incredibly tight. What do you attribute to that? I mean, it is 3 out of the 4 same members. Is something different going on with the chemistry of the band, more rehearsal? Why do you feel that you sound better now than maybe back in the day?
Well, we had I appreciate the question. We had an interesting approach, which worked very well in the 90s, which is our albums were one thing and our performances were another. We viewed performance as something that was different every night. We didn't feel beholden to the albums. We never tried to recreate the albums. We played however we felt, slower, faster, different sets every night, and it worked in that time. But in the age of streaming, in the age of the internet, and the way people now perceive music, we made a switch, and this is the first time we ever did, where we said, okay, let's actually try to recreate the albums. And we have a 3-guitar lineup with Jeff Schroeder and James Iha and myself. And I don't want to bore anyone with technology stuff, but we've done some technological stuff as well to do our best to recreate the albums. We rehearsed for 8 weeks, which is, an incredible amount of time to rehearse a show. I mean, that's a lot of rehearsal for a band. I know maybe that doesn't sound like much, but coming and playing the same songs every day. When we did it, we're our absolute best as we've ever been because we felt the fans deserved it. If we're gonna kind of make this push to kind of bring the band back as best we can, we felt we owed it to everybody to put our best effort in.
So I just want to ask you from a musician's point of view, like as a fan, I love it when I go to a concert and I hear the song exactly the way I hear it on the album. Why do artists like to slow down or speed up or play a song acoustically? Why is it more about the way they want to play the song as opposed to the way the fans want to hear the song?
Well, it's a school of thought, which is something along the lines of that the art of interpretation is more aligned in your mind as a musician to what a performance is. It's not a recreation; it's a new act. And this is really a bit of a glib way to say it. It's like you try to make love the same way every time. It's like if you're not in the moment. It'd be like if you try to go out and do the same match every night, same exact beat. It's just you're not feeding the crowd, and so you try to put yourself in a situation where you can offer the crowd something new. That said, as time has gone by, and I don't know if it's because of the 30 years of the band, more and more people wanted to hear, in essence, the album versions and less of our sort of egoistic interpretations. So we're cool with that, and you really see the results. I mean, every day, best show I've ever seen you do, best tour I've ever seen. I mean, it's so whatever we're doing is working. obviously.
You know, Bully and I talk pro wrestling, 5 days a week, and we get a lot of phone calls about people don't like the way, certain wrestlers are being pushed, and we don't want to see Roman in the main event at SummerSlam. Do you get feedback where I know it must be hard to please every single fan, but when you put your set list together, are there fans, on social media that say, I wish you were doing this song
every day?
Why aren't you doing the B side of a single from, 1994?
Every
you get
day.
that?
Oh yeah. Every day. It's never enough. It's never.
And this set list is monstrous that you've been doing on this tour.
We are literally playing the best of our best of a best, and there are still people complaining. God bless them, Hey, look, it's not a bad problem to have somebody complaining because they want to hear another great song or something. It's not the worst thing in the world. But
so you get to listen to people you get to listen to music fans and wrestling fans complain.
Oh my God! Your
Twitter feed must just be on fire.
I have to say, your average wrestling fan is a little more smartened up to where the business works, as opposed to your average music fan. I think the average music fan is a bit naive about how the music business works. I think wrestling fans tend to be a little more savvy about, oh, well, you're doing this because of that. And look, it's the real world, We're out here trying to make it happen. You don't sell out Madison Square Garden, by, putting on a clown mask. I mean, you have to bring something that has value. And at some point, you have to try to find value for the most amount of people.
So, Bully, I can send out a tweet to Billy and say, you know what? I don't like the way you're treating Nick Aldis as champion, and why aren't you playing clones tonight in Jersey? I can do both.
Dave, I'm glad you brought up Nick because I want to ask Billy a question. Billy, I've saw Nick from the first day he ever started to the point he is now as your NWA champion. You have to feel real good about the guy representing your company because he has grown a lot and he has matured a lot as a man and as a performer. First, how do you feel about him as your champion, and how do you feel about him and his chances going into All In?
Well, it's shocking to me that a man of Nick's talents is even available on the open market. And when we approached him about working with the NWA, and I had worked with him some in TNA, I had no reservations about his talent, his dedication to the business. The thing I couldn't have anticipated, and I think the thing that's been really humbling is Nick really is in the lineage of the great NWA champions. I mean, he is an old school mind. He approaches the business as an old school guy, and so he really represents the NWA in a historical way, which is like something we never even thought of because we just thought, well, here's this super talented guy. Can we work with him? Can we take this somewhere? Can we have a shared vision of where we can take the NWA? Been an absolute pleasure to work with Nick. And it's a little bit funny, and I want to say this the right way. I get a little bit of a bad rep sometimes about how I am in the business, and some of it's true, some of it's not true. I heard about Nick's rep in the business, some true, not true. Some things he'll take responsibility for because of the situation he was put into as a young man. He is an absolute pleasure to work with. I have had not even one moment of doubt of working with Nick Aldis. He is a total credit to our business.
What are you most proud of? The fact that you sold out Madison Square Garden tonight, or the fact that there's going to be a sold-out crowd of 10,000 fans September 1st watching that NWA title defended?
That's one of those kind of questions I can't answer because I'm equally as proud because, when we purchased the NWA brand a little over a year ago, to be involved in this, and all credit to the Bucks and Cody for what they're doing. I mean, we're very proud to be part of it. We're very happy to be helping promote something maybe in the bigger sense of the word because obviously the tickets have already sold. And so we're glad to be standing next to people who are super talented and seem to know what they're doing. But all credit to them. I mean, this is an incredible thing that they pulled off.
But you know what? And I don't want to just glance over that because, the NWA title and the NWA name has kind of hit rock bottom over the last few years. And for me as an old school NWA fan and really a huge fan of the NWA right now and what you're doing with that championship and what you're doing with that brand, like I'm just proud as somebody that's involved in pro wrestling to be able to be there September 1st to see that title defended. And the fact that you might see a Rhodes win that NWA title. I mean, as an old school fan yourself, I mean, what would that moment be like? And let's put Nick Aldis aside for just a second, and I'm not discrediting anything that he's done, because you're right, he's been a great representation of that title. But the fact that we could see a Rhodes win that NWA championship in front of a sold-out crowd in Chicago.
Well, let's take a step back on that. I grew up watching Dusty Rhodes on television. Never got to see him live, unfortunately, and got to meet Mr. Rhodes a couple times in person at some WWE events. I have such tremendous respect for what Dusty Rhodes represented and who he was as an athlete and a performer. When I think of professional wrestling, he's on my Mount Rushmore. So to even be involved in the business at a level where you're connected to the legacy of a Dusty Rhodes and a Ric Flair, it's humbling in a way that I can't even express. And I'm not talking as a fan. I'm talking as somebody who's just a student of history. We're talking about Madison Square Garden. You're talking about history, right? There's real history in that belt, and you cannot mess with that history. But I loved what Cody said because we did interview him, basically the same idea. And what he said? He said, people say, do it for Dusty. And he says, I do it for Dusty every day. And what's the tattoo he has on his chest? It's for his father. And I have and let me go off here for a second. I'm friends with Lisa Marie Presley. Now, Elvis is, for a musician, and of course to many people, is an absolute icon. I mean, Elvis to music is what Dusty is to wrestling, right? And there's even a little bit of Elvis in Dusty.
For sure.
Okay. So I've been friends with Lisa Marie Presley for over 20 years. Dinners, family time, met the whole. Truly integrated at times into the inner world of her life, not just somebody you just see at a club. And there are moments where you have to, sort of pinch yourself and say, "Wow, this is Elvis's daughter. I remember watching her on TV when I was a kid." And, like stupid stuff, right? One day I was talking to Lisa about her father. And it was like it clicked in my brain. She's not talking about Elvis Presley. She's talking about her dad. So we can sit here as fans and go on and on and on and on about Dusty this and Cody that. When we talk about Dusty Rhodes to Cody, that's his dad. And any guy can understand why you would do something for your father. Mm-hmm. To me, that's actually more important, that he would want to make his father proud of him, not that it's some meta wrestling thing that we can all kind of surf on, how cool. And I'm not saying it in disrespect to your question. I'm saying, to me, that's the part about professional wrestling I love, and I know Bully understands this very deeply. There's a passion there, like a deep, deep passion that we have for this business, and that's the part that I love. And when you see that, when you see it in the ring, of course, it's incandescent when it's there right in front of you, when you're watching history be made. But when you're behind the scenes with people and you see their dedication to the business, to each other, to the craft, it's pretty special.
When you talk about dedication and passion, there's one guy that you have working for you right now that I must put over because he's a huge asset to your company, and I know you know this. Dave Lagana is doing an incredible job of telling the story of All In and the NWA Championship and Cody versus Nick on social media better than I think any company can tell any story. And, please talk about him for a second and the great job that he's doing for you.
Well, we touched on this last time I came in to Bust It Open. David and I, when we were in TNA, we were both frustrated by what we saw as an opportunity to turn the company around. The business BS aside. And we had moments where you saw that our strategy about how to market the talent and tell new stories was working. And fortunately, that would get swamped in either the politics, which is classic wrestling crap, or just the business stuff that went on. The deletion series being just even one part of something that we were involved in that showed that wrestling really wants new stories to be told in new ways. So when we started the NWA, we sat down and had long, long discussions about, okay, how can we do this? And thank God, what we sort of sketched out on a piece of paper is actually, we're living it right now. And us being involved in All In, telling the story of this build, Nick versus Cody. To many wrestling fans, let's call it casual wrestling fans, I'm sure your audience is deeper in this. But to many wrestling fans, Nick Aldis is Magnus. He's that guy. To tell Nick Aldis' story where he is in 2018, to actually sort of build this right so that people go, you know what? That's a real compelling matchup. It's not sort of as simple as like Wrestling 101. That's the key. You have to make people wonder about what's going to happen. If they don't, you're really wasting the talent's time and you're really wasting the audience's time.
You know what? I would have to disagree with just one thing that you said.
You disagree with something? This is shocking. Shocking.
You see, Billy?
Bully promised me that this wasn't going to happen. He vouched for you, by the way.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Remember the source, Billy, please. Is that you mentioned Nick Aldis and that a lot of fans think of Magnus. I really think the product that you have presented, and Dave Lagana obviously gets a lot of credit for this too. I don't think that anymore. Like when
I guess we're saying the same thing. What I'm saying is, when we started this journey, if we hadn't done what we've done,
true,
and you just threw it out to a let's call it your very basic Ring of Honor fan, they're like Magnus versus like, you know what I mean? You have to actually get into the weeds here and tell who these people are. And, look, I will point to the UFC model. No one's done it better in the last 10 years than UFC of saying, why are you going to care about this guy from Azerbaijan or something,
Yep.
And what is his skill set that may actually make me going to care about this matchup I'm going to see? I mean, no one's done it better than the UFC. So, you just got to get into the deep dive of why somebody would care about a matchup. And, and I mean this humbly. With Nick, it's easy. I mean, look at him. A-level promo, A-level talent. He's in the prime of his, physicality. He is raring to go. He has much to prove to the world. He's got a nice chip on his shoulder, which works really, really well. And the matchup with Cody, I mean, we did that thing. We shot him at one of our shows where we had Cody and Nick walk towards each other 80 feet apart, did the big look, for All In. I mean, you watch that walk of those two guys together and they stand there, that's heat. That's real heat.
Billy, as a wrestling fan who grew up, obviously you were talking about Dusty, being a fan of Dusty, you being involved in the wrestling business. Other than Nick, other than Cody, who does it for you today? Who do you find yourself being a fan of? Who do you actually sit down and want to watch across the board in the business?
Gosh, well, let me wade into this thing. And you guys are, you're touching on this sort of the Roman Reigns debate. I mean, I like watching Roman Reigns. I don't get the heat on that. I mean, to me, he's a classic A-level. I mean, look at the guy. I mean, he looks good on a poster. I mean, start there. It's like, 5 years ago, it was all the heat was on Cena or whatever. It's that same sort of weird heat where it's like, okay, we're going to pick one guy that we're going to bang up on because he's either too good looking or he's, you know what I mean? I just don't get that.
But I also think now especially, and the NWA is a big reason for this, Ring of Honor obviously too, is the health of pro wrestling outside of the WWE. So I think that a lot of the fans that watch WWE right now also watch, 10 Pounds of Gold and watch Ring of Honor and watch everything that's going outside the WWE. So I think it's almost like if Roman Reigns wrestled with Ring of Honor beforehand or wrestled with Evolve, that their reaction to Roman would be completely different than the way it is right now. Do you agree?
I mean, I think it's hard to get into the WWE mind about why they do what they do. I mean, it's a what? A gazillion billion dollar company.
It's crazy.
Okay. And I caught the tail end of what you guys were talking about. I mean, what the decision making internally for the WWE on a business level and a booking level, I mean, they're obviously doing something right. People are throwing money at them. I mean, they're not chasing money. People are
they're getting billion-dollar deals with
throwing
Fox.
Money. I wish people would throw money at us like that. Okay, so we could sit here and pick it all apart all day. So I tend to look at more like who's a talent. A guy that's worth watching and I think is about to get signed with WWE is Matt Riddle.
Yep.
Very interesting, obviously coming from the MMA side. No one's ever really completely made that transition in a way where it's like they brought that sort of MMA vibe or feeling to professional wrestling. I've always been curious where Kurt Angle maybe brought the, let's call it the classic NCAA wrestler, yes, Olympic guy. There were guys, of course, in the 70s, but nobody ever had that level of success that Although with the Sheik would obviously, he's still complaining. I was first. God bless him. So, yeah, I mean, God, there's so much talent right now. It's mind-boggling the level of talent that's out there. So my argument would be, and maybe this is a better way to attack the question, I see a lot of wasted talent. Like talent not being booked properly, not being... So maybe that's the bigger argument on Roman is maybe people are arguing that they're not booking his talent, but you have to start by acknowledging that he's a talent to complain about the way he's being booked, which is kind of weird. That was always the thing against Cena, right?
Yeah. So let me follow it up with this, Billy. In your list of wasted talent, whether it's WWE, Impact, Ring of Honor, and you had the opportunity to pull a new talent into the NWA, who's your first pick?
Whew. You're going to get me in trouble here. Oh, God. I don't know if I could go there.
Why?
Well, I don't want to create any heat with anybody. You know,
you're not going to get heat with anybody. I'm asking you the question. You fall under my protection. You're fine. It's like this is wrestling is like the mafia.
Well, honestly, I don't like the way you're being booked, if we want to be honest.
What?
On the show?
No, in Ring of Honor. I don't like the way he's being booked.
What? How would you book me? Would you make me a bad guy?
Couldn't make him any worse.
I think it would be a kind of like a humble angle. You got to get him humble. He's got to, and then he does a baby face turn to build himself back up.
Believe me, he gets humbled every time he turns on the microphone and talks with me for 3 hours.
Did I get out of that question good? That was pretty good, right?
Yeah, because again, Bully's trying to make you're a guest here on the show, and Bully's making you uncomfortable.
I'm not trying to make him uncomfortable. Actually, I legitimately want to know who he would pick.
I think it's a great question.
Okay, you know what?
I think it's a great question that I will not answer.
It's a great question. But
so just so the listeners know, I just want to get it out there to bury you even more. So Dave wanted Billy to sing a duet with him of Bad Street USA. Billy Corgan, who has sold gazillions of records, and you want him to sing Bad Street with you. What is wrong with you, David?
Just thought it would be good for the show.
Selfish.
As you mentioned, Billy's part of that Diamond Club. There's very few artists that are part of that club, and to say that you are sold millions and millions of albums, something that probably artists can't do anymore in this day and age when it comes to selling albums. Something that you're going to be able to hold that distinction up high.
Yeah, I don't know if it really means anything anymore because ultimately now it's all about the streaming and. So, I mean, you hear some of the streaming numbers, it's insane. So,
crazy.
I don't know, would it be better these days to sell 1 million records or have 50 million streams of a song? It's just nuts.
Billy, getting back to the NWA for a second, obviously All In, mega show. We were talking earlier about how we believe that fans are more excited for All In than they are for SummerSlam. Yeah. We know that we are. What happens on September 2nd, win or lose for Nick Aldis? What is the direction of the NWA past All In?
Well, to answer your question faithfully, Nick Aldis is exclusive to the NWA. So he's an NWA talent. And our approach from the beginning has been that we want to identify those talents that we want to sign to the NWA. We don't feel we necessarily have to carry a full roster. We feel that the way we build our brand is to stay really open in the marketplace, work with whoever wants to work with us. But of course, we have to have talents that are our talents that can carry the NWA forward, whether they are or aren't the champion.
When you look at Nick Aldis right now, and listen, Nick Aldis has been very outspoken about the way he's been booked and matches being booked without his consent. Do you feel like that some of the bookings have been, maybe unfavorable towards Nick Aldis as your champion?
No, because we're in the business of building the NWA. So you sign an exclusive deal with anybody, that's just the breaks, When I worked for a record company, I mean, they had me doing stuff I didn't necessarily want to do. Like I said, Nick's been an absolute pleasure to work with on the business side, but that doesn't mean he doesn't voice his opinion. Mm-hmm. And there's been some promotions we work with where he wasn't happy about it. He certainly let us know. And at the end of the day, we said, look, this is just the way it's got to be to build this brand back up.
Are there any former NWA champions or any high-profile NWA wrestlers that will be able to attend All In?
We have some contact with people. But generally speaking, it comes down to they want to know if you want to be in business with them. And the way we look at it is we can help promote what they're doing, but unless we're going to do actual wrestling business, there's really no reason to have a deal. And I don't, look, everybody's in, wrestling is very much an independent-minded business for the most part, and we're totally cool with that. We ultimately feel that we can help promote anybody and help them sell more of whatever they want to sell. But if they want to do wrestling business with us, that's a different equation.
What are you going to do the weekend of All In? Because you're in the middle of this huge tour with Smashing Pumpkins.
I'll be on stage in San Diego during the show, which is trust me, and no disrespect to the people of San Diego, but that's going to be tough for me, because I really want to be there because it's a historic night for a variety of reasons, and it's one of those things.
Did you think that this was ever going to happen? Because I know, and we've spoken to you, and I know you had goals. And when you look at your two worlds and how they're now crossing over, you look at Smashing Pumpkins, this tour, and how successful this tour is. And then you look at the NWA, and there was questions about the NWA. There was questions about the involvement, and now seeing what's taken place with the 10 Pounds of Gold and all the views of these vignettes by Dave Lagana, and then the sold-out crowd at All In. Did you ever think the success would happen to this brand so fast?
No, absolutely not. No, I mean, like I said, we're pretty lucky. But at the same point, it has a lot to do with the way we planned this. And so when the opportunities come, we know what to do, We took a lot of criticism in the beginning for not, going out and signing a bunch of wrestlers who, by the way, would work for a bunch of other companies at the same point. And again, I don't mean this critically, but, you see a lot of wrestlers appearing for a lot of different promotions now. We don't see that as necessarily being good for our brand. So we were criticized for not going out and signing a bunch of people to sort of like not really exclusive deals and running their names out and saying, well, this is the new NWA. We just thought that was a crock of what. We've gone about it our own way. So when these opportunities come knocking, we can move and we can move fast.
In our industry, you never take things personally. I'm sure in rock and roll, things could be similar. I just want to talk about a past incident. In your last weeks and days with TNA at the time and the legal struggles that you were going through with them, did it ever become personal with you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I'm, I'll talk about it however you want to talk about it, but to put it simply, I mean, I was completely deceived by people I thought were my friends. We're not just talking people who are business associates. I mean, you're talking about going to people's houses, playing with their kids, in some cases staying in their house, and to realize that they just have no problem stabbing you in the back. That was pretty shocking to me. And, look, life happens, things happen, but that was some pretty scummy stuff.
Wow. Interesting. I was always, I was generally, I don't think I ever got to talk to you about that before. And just with all the negativity that surrounds that company at the time, I always wondered, like, man, how could Billy not take this personally when he went out on a limb for them? So,
well, the numbers are out there. I had put $1.8 million of my own cash into the company. There were literally days where if I didn't put that money in, the company would have been shut down. Wow. There would be no Impact Wrestling today if I hadn't written a check on that particular day. So what was weird to me was not only that I was being deceived in my estimation, fraudulently, a borderline criminal. And I, in fact, even talked to authorities whether there was criminality involved, and there was differing opinions about actual criminality. But then when it went into more of a legal process, because that was, as advised by attorneys, that was probably the most likely way to recover my money, which I ultimately did. What was even more shocking was watching people that you had considered friends only months before, literally inventing stories out of whole cloth. I mean, just literally inventing situations and scenarios that didn't happen. And that was like, I mean, then you start getting in like, wow, I'm like in a bad Vince Russo wrestling angle here. Like, did Vince book this shit?
Poor Vince Russo.
I know. I love Vince. I love Vince. There's no heat with me and Vince. But I mean, it was like one of those weird, like, you got to be kidding me. It was wacky world. It was wacky world. And just to tease everyone, so because we are in a professional wrestling environment here. there are stories that I haven't told that I may tell someday that are even more insane. That if I ever tell the whole story, I mean, it is quite interesting. The way it's unbelievable. What a story.
And I totally believe him, Dave, because on in many ways, I'm sure on a different financial level, I have the same stories that he does, because just by listening to Billy tell these general stories, I know what he's talking about. There was a lot of deception and a lot of deception financially. And it went on from guys and gals that were making $300 a night to a guy who invested $1.8 million in a company. And at the end of the day, there are a lot of stories to be told about the demise. And I said one day I'd like to sit down and write a book called TNT, The Total Nonstop Truth.
I will say this to anybody who might be listening. If anybody's out there's like an independent journalist that wants to write a wrestling book, the TNA story is an unbelievable book. If you thought the WCW sort of meltdown was, the TNA story is I mean, it's like Dallas meets, I don't know what you got an analogy there. Dallas meets Knots Landing. I don't know.
Dallas and Dynasty or something.
Dallas meets Kiss Phantom of the Park. There you go.
Oh wow, that's got to be horrible.
So what you're saying is that you got some big stars, but they're in a scenario that's really cheesy.
Yeah,
just really bad.
Yeah,
though I am a fan of Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park.
You would be.
Of course I am. Let me ask you this. So after that whole scenario, what made you want to get back into doing pro wrestling again?
I thought I was pretty much out, honestly. I'd kind of given up. I obviously felt demotivated, and typical stuff. Talent that I thought I had good relationships with. Suddenly, I'm not in power anymore. The texts stopped coming. Not interested in my next album anymore. That kind of stuff. Things you learn along the way in the wrestling business. But then this opportunity came up to purchase the NWA from Bruce Tharp. And we entered a very long and circuitous negotiation, which ultimately obviously led to the purchase. And then when we head through the process where you get the trademarks from the government, that's a whole nother process, clear all the legalities. Even people questioning, whether WWE had some right to the trademarks, that was ultimately cleared up. So, to be 100% owner of an organization that started 70 years ago in a hotel that Dave was just in the other day,
wow,
Dave Lagana, here we are. And marching in all in. I mean, it's like, wow, what a journey. But at the end of the day, and I mean this very respectfully, this is really about the NWA. If we had just bought, Larry's wrestling title, we wouldn't be having the same conversation. This really is to the credit and the power of what was built through blood, sweat, and tears by men whose names we won't forget.
I agree, because I think when you were a part of TNA, a lot of fans were like, all right, Billy Corgan's a name, he's a mainstream name, I'm going to take a look at TNA, but there's such a history and love for the NWA that, it's almost like the two worlds don't mix for me. Like when I see a 10 pounds of gold and I hear you and you're on a lot of these vignettes, I don't think of Billy Corgan, the front man of Smashing Pumpkins. I think of Billy Corgan, the man behind the NWA.
That actually gets to why I wanted to get into this, because I thought this is one situation where the title and the brand is more important to all media than I am. Because I got sick of reading that same piece in USA Today.
Yeah.
Rockstar wrestling. It's like, come on, man. I mean, I gave up a lot of personal capital to get into the wrestling business. No matter what anybody thinks about me being in the wrestling business, it's not necessarily an easy fit when you're talking to some sort of basic liberal, fan who thinks wrestling's kind of dumb and why would you be in? It's like, like it's almost they talk to me like, isn't that kind of beneath you? That kind of vibe.
Yeah, I get that.
And so I gave up a lot in that sort of general people questioning my sanity, and I don't want anything for it. I love being involved in professional wrestling, and I love being, the owner of the NWA. I mean, what a proud thing to walk through the door as. I'm totally into it, totally dedicated, and the fact that the NWA brand will always precede my involvement, that's why I got involved, because that's easy. Because then I don't have to tell the story. The title and the history
Absolutely.
tells that story.
Do you feel like, because there is the stigma about pro wrestling, Bully and I feel it. I feel it being here at SiriusXM. Oh, what show do you host? I host a pro wrestling show. But do you feel like that stigma is a little bit less recently? Like when like we talked about before, $1 billion deal the WWE has with Fox, the health and the NWA and Ring of Honor and everything with All In. Do you feel like it's not as bad as it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago?
How about a year ago? I sat in a meeting a year ago with some people that I was in business with at the time and told them, I own this brand and, typical stuff. Let's explore the TV landscapes. Let's see what's out there if anybody's interested in the NWA business. They came back a couple months later and said, nobody wants to get involved in professional wrestling and television anymore. And I said, you got to be kidding me. There's no way. And they said, no, they're moving away from wrestling. I said, wrestling's been on television every day that television's been
since the beginning
in America. What are you talking about? Right? No,
it's true.
There's really no momentum there. Maybe if you guys got, maybe you do something where it's like, you do a boot camp with kids and, again, you try to use me as if I'm more important than the NWA. I said, get out of here, right? Okay. And here we are, WWE just signed a gazillion billion-dollar deal. Are you freaking kidding me? The wrestling's never been stronger than it is right now.
Absolutely.
So every time that we turn around and we can point to that removes that stigma. And as we get to where the kayfabe days really are in the rearview mirror, and people recognize the wrestling business as a very robust part of the entertainment business, right up there with Broadway, right up there with movies, right up there with the music business, I think that stigma is going to go right out the door.
Billy, whether you're comparing wrestlers to musicians or the business of wrestling and music, just how similar are they?
Well, everyone's insane. You start there. The entertainers, and I'm using that word very generally, they're all crazy, and you start there and work backwards, and then you try to figure out how to run a business around these crazy people. In this case, in my world, I'm the crazy person, and in the NWA, I have to be the adult in the room, So, what I love about both businesses, rock and roll and wrestling, is at the end of the day, you're building around people who are one of a kind. And that's what I love. It's like there's something sort of special about when you can put people together, when you can put a Cody and a Nick together in the prime of their life. Mm-hmm. There's sparks that fly there that you can't manufacture on a piece of paper. And so that's what I love about that.
Here with Billy Corgan talking NWA, talking about the big show for Smashing Pumpkins tonight at a sold-out Madison Square Garden. And Bully, I said it before. I think I said it to Billy as well, is that if you need a story going into All In and coming out of All In, what better and bigger story than that NWA championship between Nick Aldis and Cody Rhodes?
And, I'm not a guy that blows smoke up anybody's ass. I tell it like it is. I think this is the greatest story in professional wrestling right now. How can it not be? You're talking about the legacy of the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. You're talking about a wrestler in Nick Aldis who has carried the belt extremely well with the prestige that it deserves.
And you can also argue only the real true world champion because how he defends that title.
Absolutely. And then you have the Rhodes name. That championship being so synonymous with Dusty, and now the opportunity for Cody to stand in the middle of the ring and become the NWA champion again. If you can tell me a story in pro wrestling that even remotely comes close to that, I'd be more than willing to listen, because I'd be more than happy to shoot you down.
Yeah. That's high five. Yeah.
No, but think about that. Like you mentioned a year ago, and us talking about the NWA championship being defended, the NWA championship being more than just relevant, but being the best storyline going on in the world of pro wrestling right now.
This is why we argue that the future of professional wrestling, as far as the way the stories are told, is just tell the real stories. You don't have to invent reality. The reality's right in front of you.
Yep. And
earlier in the show, this is exactly what we're talking about, Dave, earlier in the show, when I say I like my wrestling real. Let's just take real life scenarios and put them in the ring. Look at the best stories are real life scenarios. I'm just the one that'll pop off the top of my head. Let's take the I'll call it unfortunate family struggle between Jeff Jarrett, Kurt Angle, and Karen, right? That was very, very, very real. That translated in the wrestling ring fantastically. Can we agree on that?
Yes.
People were able to relate to it. They were into it. It's real life. It's divorce. It's this. It's that. There's children involved, and it works. The realer, the better. And that's where I want my wrestling going into the future. Very real. This story about the NWA World Heavyweight Championship is very real. It's as legitimate gets.
And Edge and Matt Hardy. I mean, again, realism that people, were emotionally invested in. And you're right, Bully, and you say it all the time. You need to have a little bit of reality when it comes to pro wrestling. And Billy, I think the NWA is giving us that right now.
Well, it also meshes very well with where the NWA as a let's call it a type of wrestling. I don't even know if it's the right way to say it. I mean, if you go back and watch the older stuff, it had a lot of that in it.
Yeah.
The sort of the more outlandish stuff really kind of came later. But the real bones of the NWA was like tough guys fighting over something for real reasons.
Yeah,
and there was a reason they used to send shooters down to Texas. That was that was real. You weren't sending a guy down into El Paso who couldn't shoot, because God knows what was really going on down there.
Yep.
You know what Billy said? It's crazy because it's my exact take, Dave, and we spoke about this a bunch of times. I was born, being a New Yorker and having the WWF force fed down my throat, and those cartoon characters are larger than life guys. I felt myself gravitating to the NWA in the mid 80s because it was real men fighting about real issues and real championships. It felt so real to me. And that's why I say, if you take the mid-'80s NWA, mix in a little bit of ECW and some Attitude Era, stir it and pour, I think it's the best blend of pro wrestling you can get.
I agree. And I also think the fan right now wants more of the quote-unquote pro wrestling as opposed to sports entertainment. And I know that, it's one and the same, but I really do feel that the wrestling fan right now wants that old school pro wrestling with what's going on right now as opposed to what's going on possibly with the WWE with sports entertainment.
Hey, I'll put it in simple terms, right? I'm 6'3.5", right? When I stand next to Bully, he looks like he could smash me into pieces. Okay?
Yeah.
That's who I want to watch. I want to watch somebody who can smash you into pieces. If the guy can't smash you into pieces, why am I watching him?
I love it. I love it. Billy, it's been absolute pleasure having you in here for a whole hour. That's absolutely fantastic, especially since you have a show tonight. I will say this, man. Congratulations on everything that's happening, not only in the world of Smashing Pumpkins, but the NWA.
Thank you very much, and congratulations on your co-brand with Bully on the show. I think the future is bright. I know you're struggling with the name change, but I've seen some of the sketches. I know there's some worry about whose name goes first and stuff, but I think it's going to work out.
And also too, I got to mention that you got me in a lot of trouble, Billy. It is my wife's birthday and she's a big Smashing Pumpkins fan, and I never even thought of buying her tickets. And the fact that I told her that you were coming in today, didn't let her know until last second. I am completely in the doghouse with my wife.
Don't say nothing, Billy. He's putting you on the spot. He's not. Normally, he chases the hug. Now he's chasing the tickets. Make him pay. Make him pay. $1.8 million that man had to shell out. You can go into your cheap ass pockets, take out $80, and buy some instructed seats for your wife.
I guess I'll have to do that. Let me go to the
go to StubHub.
And you look at some of these prices. Well, Billy, it was great having you on the show. Love that NWA, baby. Got nothing, huh, Billy? Nothing. Well,
I
go ahead.
The thing that strikes me is, like you get the obstructed view, but she gets the good seat. Like, you're behind the pillar, but she's just next to you, and she could totally see everything. She's got to tell you what's happening. That seems to be about right.
Billy, thanks so much. Again,
thanks,
congratulations on everything. Kill it tonight at the Garden, and I know you will. Again, NWA, 10 pounds of gold. You can see that on YouTube. And again, Cody Rhodes and Nick Aldis for the NWA Championship, September 1st at All In.